In this next sub-series of lessons, we're going to be focusing on section 5 of the syllabus, which is the internet and its uses. You learn about the difference between the internet, which is the infrastructure, and the World Wide Web, which are the services that we use all the time. We're going to be looking at the different component parts of a URL, what a browser is, how HTTP and HTTPS protocols work. We're going to be looking at how web pages are requested, retrieved, and displayed on your computer. And we're also going to be looking at technologies such as digital currencies and blockchain, and how blockchain is now providing a much more secure and public way of tracking transactions. Finally, we'll learn about a range of cybersecurity threats and how we can protect ourselves against them. So this section is quite relevant, and students find it very interesting because they can relate to it based on their day-to-day. In this particular lesson, though, we're going to be focusing just on the internet and the World Wide Web. We're going to be looking at what the term URL means and how we can use HTTP and HTTPS to securely exchange information online. So let's start by looking at what the internet is. Everyone seems to know about the internet. A huge majority of people don't realize that the internet isn't just a magical thing. It's actually hardware. And the World Wide Web is the software that they use day to day. So if you say that you're searching something online, well, you're using the World Wide Web. But if you want to think about the internet, you need to think about routers and computers and cables and all the physical hardware there is. So the word internet comes from interconnected network, since it's basically a worldwide collection of interconnected networks. So your school's LAN would probably connect to another LAN, and this connects to another company's LAN, and all these interconnected networks make up the internet. So the internet is actually a concept rather than something tangible, that is something that we can physically touch. It relies on the physical infrastructure that allows networks and individual devices to connect to other networks and devices. Now, more specifically, a huge type of network is called a wide area network, or a WAN. This type of network spans a large geographic area, in this case, the whole world. The internet is an incredible structure if you think about it. Millions and millions of people at various locations all connected together. So if you wanted to define it, all you would simply say is a very large global network that allows users to access the World Wide Web. It is the physical structure or the infrastructure, which is the components, cables, and the devices all connected together. So what about the World Wide Web? Well, the World Wide Web, if you want to go into the history, was invented by Sir Tim Berners-Lee in 1989. And he was a physicist at CERN in Geneva, Switzerland. And he was also a computer scientist. And he found that there were several computers that had information stored on them, but he would have to physically go there to access them. So he wanted to create a solution that would allow him to access that information from one particular place. So a lot of computers were already being connected together at CERN. So he realized that he could share information using an emerging technology called hypertext. And I think around 1990, he first developed the three fundamental parts that create the World Wide Web. That's the hypertext markup language, HTML, the URL, the Uniform Resource Locator, and the Hypertext Transfer Protocol, HTTP. So by the end of 1990, the first web server was set up and the first web page displaying information about the World Wide Web project was created. You can see that on screen. So the World Wide Web is only a part of the internet, and this part users can access using web browser software. The World Wide Web consists of massive collection of web pages and is based on the HTTP or Hypertext Transfer Protocol. You've got to be aware of this term. So if you were defining it, you'll simply say World Wide Web is a way of accessing information using the internet. So the internet and the World Wide Web are actually quite different. So just to summarize the differences between both of them, users can send and receive emails over the internet. The internet allows online chatting via text, audio, and video. It makes use of transmission protocols and internet protocols. TCP/IP is a very common protocol. It's a worldwide collection of interconnected networks and devices. The World Wide Web, on the other hand, is a collection of multimedia web pages and other information available on websites. It uses HTTP or HTTPS protocols and is written using a language called HTML, Hypertext Markup Language. To access a web page, you need to know the Uniform Resource Locator, or URL. Web resources can be accessed by web browsers, and you need to use the internet to access information from web servers. So do pause the video and make sure you understand the difference between both of them. and how they're utilized. So to access a web page, we need to know where that web page is located. And with millions of web pages, it can become quite tricky. A URL, or a uniform resource locator, is a fundamental component of the World Wide Web. Each website and web page on the World Wide Web has a text-based address, and this address is called a URL. To access this particular web page, a user normally types the URL in the address bar of a web browser. Now, most people get confused and call the search field and an address bar, and most browsers now combine the address bar and the search field all together at the top. But remember, for the purpose of the exam, the address bar is the bit at the top where you type in www.youtube.com, something like that. A URL has three main components. It consists of the protocol, the domain name, and the web page or the file name. So web browsers are typically software that allows users to access and display web pages on their device screens. Browsers interpret something called hypertext markup language, the language that is used to create websites, and they then produce the translated web page. So make sure you know what a web browser is, a piece of software that retrieves and displays web pages, and what a URL stands for. So how does it all work? Well, the protocol part is basically HTTP, or the secure version, which uses SSL, HTTPS. And protocols are basically a set of rules that allow communication between different devices. The website address is normally the domain host. For in this case, it can be broken down into www, which is the host, then the website name like YouTube, which is domain name, and then it could have a domain type, which is .com, .org, .gov, things like that. And sometimes there's a country code as well, like .uk, .th, .de, .cy, things like that. The path is the actual web page that we want to access, but it's often omitted because we normally go to the root directory by default and load up a page called index.html. However, you can also load up specific pages if you know what they're called directly without going via the index page. So in an exam, you will need to know the different paths. So if I give you the URL example at the bottom of the screen, which says https / www.youtube.com / computer science for you, which is this channel's URL, you can quickly identify the different component parts. The protocol is quite clearly HTTPS, so that's the secure version which uses SSL. The next up is the website address, which includes the domain host, www, the domain name, YouTube, the domain type, .com. And then you've got the actual path, which is computer science for you, which will have its own index.html file there. So that's where the file name is. That's automatically loaded up when you come to this channel. Now, what's the difference between HTTP or HTTPS? We just referred that earlier, that hypertext transfer protocol is basically a set of rules that must be obeyed when transferring files across the internet. But when you need some form of security, for example, SSL or TLS, these are protocols that we will talk a lot more about when we talk about security later. These encrypt data, so an eavesdropper or an interceptor can't read it. This then changes the protocol to HTTPS. You normally see a green padlock in the status bar or in the address bar as well. The S normally stands for secure and basically means that it's a more secure way of sending and receiving data across the network. All you need to simply know is that HTTPS uses a secure protocol to make sure that information transmitted online is safer. HTTP does not do that. And normally web browsers are used to access web pages, and browsers normally translate HTML from web servers and websites, and they show the results of the translation, for example, videos, images, text, audio, or a web page. And these browsers have a lot of common features, and most of the time students forget those features, even though they use it every day. So make sure you remember the following features. A browser normally has a home page. A browser can store a user's favorite websites, bookmarks, for example. It can keep a history of web pages. For example, you might want to revisit a page which you looked at 4 days or 5 days ago. You can browse your history to find it. It allows users to navigate forwards and backwards. It allows many web pages to be opened in the form of tabs. It can make use of cookies. It allows the use of hyperlinks. Data is normally stored in a cache, so web pages can be loaded up quickly. Interactivity can be provided through the use of JavaScript, and it normally uses an address bar to type the URL in. Now that's all you need to know about web browsers. Normally you just need to know a few things, and chances are if you remember the use of navigation, cookies, bookmarks, history, you'll probably get full 4 marks in the exam to these type of questions. Which leads us on to the questions for today. You should now be able to answer the following questions. What is the difference between the internet and World Wide Web? What is a URL? What are the common parts of a URL? What is meant by HTTP? What is the difference between HTTP and HTTPS? And what is the function of a web browser? And you should be able to list 3 features of it. That's all there is for today. As usual, if you have any questions, please do write them in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.